So today we're going to talk about marketing. Building on our last episode, we were reviewing everything that needs to happen to get a house ready to rent, working with an owner, going over a budget. Now we're moving into the most important part and probably one of the most fun parts, marketing, getting your home out for the masses to actually see.
All right, welcome to the Investment Property Geeks of Charlotte. We're your hosts, Chris and Jesse. And Jesse just waved to the camera, which you can't see if you're not watching this.
And if you are watching, hello.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, hey, please help us out. Help boost this podcast. Keep it going. Share the love, leave us a review or subscribe to whatever platform that you're on. And make sure you check us out at investmentpropertygeeks.com or email us if you have any questions, comments, things you would love to hear about. Just want to talk geeky real estate stuff. We'd love to hear from you. Podcast at investmentpropertygeeks.com.
So today we're going to talk about marketing. Building on our last episode, we were reviewing everything that needs to happen to get a house ready to rent, working with an owner, going over a budget. Now we're moving into the most important part and probably one of the most fun parts, marketing, getting your home out for the masses to actually see. Why is this vital? Why is it important? Well, of course, if you have determined that you are now looking to rent out your home, it's not going to rent itself. We need to actually advertise. And it's been interesting lately in Charlotte. We've actually found some instances where houses are renting before we advertise. That's not always the case. It's a red hot market right now. Who knows how long that's going to continue? Marketing is an important and integral piece of getting your house out to any potential tenants. There's some things you can do to actually help right out of the gate. We talked in the last episode about small yet very low-cost, big impact repairs that you can make on your home. A lot of it revolved around curb appeal, functionality of the house, little things like doorknobs, making sure they're up to date, light fixtures, light bulbs all matching, things like that. Those are easy ways for you to actually help us market the home. Basically, if you and some people are immaculate, Chris, your house is immaculate right now. Credit to Amy.
Thank you. Yeah, that's all Amy.
It's his wife, but
this has
still
nothing to do with me.
But the most important thing in an instance like this, Chris's house, I would tell him to maintain their current lifestyle and continue living the way that they are. And, if there's an opportunity to make small improvements, you certainly can. In this instance, we talked about this before, the color in here. I like it personally, but...
I like it too, but it's not going to rent well.
No.
So we're recording in this...
forest green?
Yeah. I'll call it well-educated hunter philosopher green. Mm-hmm. It's actually called messenger bag.
Right.
Thank you, Sherwin-Williams, for the wonderful paint names, because that sounds way better than hunter green.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. But even we've got stuff like if we were going to go rent out this property, like we talked about last time, that we got like things that we just have grown to live with, that we would have to change. Like our storm door doesn't latch all the way. And I think I talked about that last time. Or, I've got these like smart light switches, and all of a sudden like this light bulb in the front decides to go out, and now my smart switch isn't working and going on. So those are all things that I choose to live with as a homeowner, because I'm like, I'll get to that later. I'm busy. But when you're renting out your property, you can't.
Right.
You can, and like we said before, then you'll be called a slumlord, and you don't want the type of tenant probably that's going to want to rent that property.
Right.
But yeah, you got to make sure that stuff's fixed up, because now you've got a business and you're serving a client. And that client has certain expectations that you need to rise to the occasion. So
absolutely. So continue to maintain a house if it is already in pretty good shape, but always look out for the small things that Chris was just mentioning.
And we're hoping too today, like when we talk about marketing your property, so it's not just like, hey, if it's a property management company doing it for you, obviously, we're going to be a little bit biased and think that we've got a bit of a leg up than if you do it on your own. But, a lot of this stuff, like we're trying to be really helpful too. If you're doing this on your own, don't worry. This episode's going to be super helpful for you as well. Because kind of with each one of these, we want to give you some really practical takeaways. So it's not just like high level philosophy, but it's a little bit of high level philosophy with a lot of like, this is how you actually go do it.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some, this is how you actually go do it today,
Yep.
which I'm hoping will be, really valuable to folks.
Yeah, and some very good points, and you can learn from personal experiences and the trials and tribulations of property management. We'll get to that.
Yes. All right.
One thing we also talked about quite a bit in the last podcast, and it really does come into marketing, your long-term vision as an owner. What are you looking to do with the property? And I mention that because how you market the property directly impacts the type of tenant you can get into your home. Ergo, if we're bringing in a higher quality tenant, we are preserving and protecting the property. You are hopefully preserving and protecting the property for the long haul with that better quality tenant. So keep that in mind. What is your ultimate goal? So we're going to also talk about, again, why this is so important. Let me tell you a quick funny story about marketing. I shared this with Chris earlier, actually. There's a lot of different creative ways that you can market your home. Realtors are pretty witty, and I saw several months ago someone was marketing a house that was for sale across from the street from a cemetery as having very quiet neighbors. So it's not a lie. I mean, it's a little dark.
It's awful and awesome.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, but I remember it. I'm talking about it on this podcast, so I mean, obviously, it has an impact. So marketing needs to actually grab someone's attention, and doing something like that is certainly going to grab your audience's attention. So again, it's just being creative. One thing we talked about quite a bit the last time, and we're going to really hit home on this today, is putting yourself in your renter's shoes. So if you're marketing your property, yeah, you love one aspect of it, but think about it from the standpoint of a potential tenant. Like, you might have a great backyard and a large deck. Advertise that. Think about that. Like, that's a selling point for the property. You want to highlight and accentuate the cool things about your property. And
Yeah, absolutely.
That's just a creative way to, it's not even creative really. It's just, utilizing the gifts of your property and accentuating them.
Yeah, great. And at the same time too, I mean, we talked about this last time and you've already hinted at it too. If your property does have something that's super unique about it, it could be cool, but it could also be very detracting depending on what it is. So
True.
You might want to think about if it could potentially be a deterrent. How do you downplay that?
Mm-hmm.
Or how do you make that space or that item more universal or more applied to a kind of a broader audience? So I've got, if I may, I've got a really good story about this. So there's this woman that came to us a while back, and she's like, so I have this unique property. It's near Noda. Okay, well, unique property near Noda, big surprise. But it was actually quite unique. It was an older home, and it was a 2-bed, 1-bath with like this tiny little kitchen, and it had this backyard that was kind of a mess, but it had potential. And the whole home had potential, but they had just really not kept up with it. And the most unique thing about this is there were some musicians that lived there at some point in time. And so they had added on this, they'd covered this utility closet and put 2 glass doors to this utility closet. And that was kind of an ancillary recording room. But then one of the main bedrooms up front had all this soundproofing, and it was painted flat black. And then the wall into the living room had this plexiglass window, so you could see from the living room into the quote unquote recording studio. And then, oh no, it gets better. Jesse's giving me the eyes what? So the door to this bedroom was a glass pane door, right? Because they never use it as a bedroom. So I'm like, okay, glass pane. Not many people want a bedroom that has a glass door on it. Mm-hmm. They would like some privacy, typically, unless you're a weirdo. Yeah. And then the closet, which was really tiny because it's an old small house. The closet to the recording studio No, the closet to the other bedroom on the other side of the wall. You open up that closet and you go inside this closet, which is like the size of a coat closet. And that is like where they had their equipment, like the sound booth or whatever, if you will. So in that closet in the back bedroom, like you had to step in the closet, that's all black. And then there's this plexiglass window looking into that second bedroom, all voyeuristic style.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. And so she's like, I think someone would really like it. And I'm like, maybe.
Yeah.
Probably not.
I'm betting no.
Yeah.
That's a great example of a unique thing and not to accentuate about your
Yeah.
house.
So, I mean, you could, I could have been wrong, and maybe there are a lot of people who wanted that, but the way it was done was just kind of chintzy. And if you're listening, so-and-so whose name I shall not name, I'm really sorry, and it's all good. And I think you took my advice. So hopefully you're laughing, but you're probably not listening to this, but, so a few things that we recommended were, like, hey, let's at least take down all the soundproofing stuff, paint, and then you got to get rid of like the peepholes into the bedroom, because people are just going to think that's weird. And if you don't want to replace the door going into the bedroom, which I highly recommend you do, because it also had a lock on it, like a keyed lock, which is bad and against like fire code and stuff. So, in addition to that, like you want, at least put like curtains on that door or something like that to make it look more like a bedroom. So that's just kind of like you said, that's an interesting example. But like one where I would say there's another one where I saw where I would accentuate is, we've got another property that we manage where an engineer at one time had owned the property, and he built this huge shop in the backyard, and it's in this part of Charlotte where like it's very wooded in this neighborhood. That's very wooded. It's an older home, and it's in this part of Charlotte where you just can't find that, and people love that. So we took a lot of extra pictures of that thing and made sure in our videos and stuff it highlighted that, because that was something that, that's pretty universal. Not very many people are going to be like, oh, gross, it has a huge garage. That's awful. I don't ever want to rent that. But there are people who have a work truck, or they have a hobby, or they're woodworkers or whatever, and they can't find anything.
Yep.
And so you are going to maybe get a little bit of a premium if you just happen to run across that right person.
Yeah, absolutely. Brings up, it's just a matter of,
words, Jesse. Words.
Words. It's late in the day. We've been recording for a while now. Jesse's getting a little loopy. Needs a York peppermint patty or some kind of.
I don't think that's water in your aquafina.
Yeah, yeah. Words are hard, but no. What I was going to say was that, as Chris is mentioning here, marketing. It's got to be unique to your property. It's got to be creative. It's got to be something that, as we mentioned earlier, is going to be universally appealing, or hopefully more universally appealing to your potential renters. You might like it. It might be unique to you, but let's not accentuate it if it's weird. Is that how you said it before?
Yeah. Weird, special. Well, and I think the way to think about it is like you might have someone who has a specific need that you're going after. Okay, that's fine. Just realize if that's who you're really targeting, you might maybe get a slight increase in premium rent, but realize that you're probably going to risk having bigger vacancy in between, because your audience is a lot smaller, or your target market's a lot smaller. Whereas if you instead go much more broad, so that would have been the case like with this musician's place. Like maybe she could have gotten more money, but I would bet more than anything, and the reason why I gave her the advice I did is because for the amount of increased rent she would get, I thought she was going to have a lot more vacancy waiting around to find that perfect tenant, and it would have cost her more in the long run to like sit around and wait and not get any rent, even though it's going to be a higher rent. Versus if you go for the masses, which is what this is talking about, right? Marketing for the masses. That's the name of this podcast. So if you go market for the masses, you're more likely to reduce your time on market and your vacancy and have more of a consistent tenant base, even if you don't get quote unquote the highest rent possible. Because ultimately it's about the total amount of money you put in your pocket, not the dollar value you advertise the rental for.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to skip a little bit because what we want to talk about, we're kind of laying the foundation for why marketing is important, different ways you can actually market your property. An important question to ask is when you should market your property. And I've got quite a bit of experience with this. In many instances, all right, let's put it this way. There's two different opportunities for renting out your home. You are either an investor who is living somewhere else already, other side of town, different state, maybe even another country. We work with people like that all the time. Or you are an owner who is presently living in your home and considering renting it out. That's great. Those are wonderful things. That's an opportunity we love when that happens. We want to make sure you are 110% crystal clear in your mind and in your expectations on where you're going, when you're going, and that you are not marketing your property prior to having another roof over your head for you and your family. That happens all the time, and it creates a huge issue for both you as the property owner and any potential tenants who are trying to move in. Because keep in mind, if you are taking your time moving out of your house, you are now impacting the lives of multiple other individuals who are potentially trying to come in. You're first and foremost, you're leaving a horrible impression for your potential new tenants. And then beyond that, that is creating a backlog for them. That is creating a backlog for the house that they're in. I know you don't necessarily care about that as much, but you should, because
you should.
It's creating a huge problem, and it is not going to be a good situation for anybody.
Well, go back to episode 1, right, where we talked about you renting out your property is your business.
Yep.
And the tenant is your customer.
Absolutely.
And so if you are showing up to a hotel, right, and you were paying $2,000 or $1,500 for that, and you showed up at check-in time, or maybe even after check-in time, and they said, "Oh, just kidding. Hasn't been cleaned yet, but go ahead and move in anyway and still pay the full amount of rent.
Right.
And we hope you stay a long time and really like it and keep renting from us again in the future. Please leave us a 5-star review."
Yeah.
And you're going to go, "What?"
Exactly.
The same is true here. Like, just, you don't want to do that. So whether you're living in the property or you're buying this property as an investor, this is really typical too, right? If there are always closings that can go wrong or take longer. Financing can fall through. You can have issues with inspections, contractors. Lord willing, complete the job on time. We know that doesn't always happen, right? So, just be really thoughtful about making sure you have enough buffer built in there, as Jesse's point, which is a great one, because again, they're your customers. They matter. You don't want to tick them off. They feel like they got the bait and switch, and now they can't wait to get out of there. And then now you've got that turnover cost after only a year. So
exactly,
don't do that to your tenants.
Yeah, or yourself. I mean,
or yourself.
You're putting yourself in a very, very tough spot, especially if that's a house you're living in presently. So it can't stress that, and we mentioned it in multiple podcasts now. Have a vision and make this part of not just your vision, but your actual plan of execution for getting that house rent ready. Build some extra time for yourself. If you think you need 2 days, maybe you need 5. Consider, ask yourself the hard questions on that. I know it's enticing to want to get that house out to market as quickly as possible, but do it the right way. That also comes in with outstanding work on the property. When when you're out there thinking about your investment property or renting it, are you doing the work, or are you doing work with a contractor? Is the contractor getting you over the finish line, or are you pretty handy and trying to do it yourself? That's fine if you are, but make sure, for all the reasons we just mentioned, you are sticking to your own deadlines for getting everything completed. Otherwise, you are going to be in a world of trouble.
And Jesse, so you mentioned when should you market? Maybe you're going to talk about this, so just slap me across the head and tell me to shut up if I'm asking a question prematurely. But what about like what time of year? So like there's when to market as far as relative to when you're moving out.
Right.
But we get I'm sure you get the question all the time, and people are probably wondering like, hey, is there some time of year that I remember when I got my first few investment properties, I never really thought about this at all, about seasonality and time of year, because I didn't have kids or anything like that, right? I was just like, I don't know, people need a place to live. They need a place to live.
Right.
So are there certain times a year that are easier or better than others, or?
Well, you do make a good point. I mean, rentals do occur year round. That is very true. Mm-hmm. But you're exactly right. The hottest time of the market, or the hottest time for actual rental properties, is pretty much right now, the summertime.
Yep.
I would say it starts April, May, kind of as school is kind of winding down, right through the September, maybe even in October a little bit. kind of dies off through the holidays and into the winter months a little bit. Again, there are still rental opportunities out there. People are always looking to move, but I think your hottest time of year really is, I'd say, May through October.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. And I would say that, like, what we tell people, and we have to be really careful. We talked a little bit in the last episode about the dangers of overpricing your property and pricing it too high. If you are renting your property and you're getting close to the Thanksgiving holiday and anywhere up until the beginning of January, don't you dare overprice that thing, because you're going to regret it. Or if you do, just pay really, really, really close attention to how much traffic you're getting. And we'll talk about that later. What's the right amount of traffic on a property? What should you be expecting? Otherwise that thing's just going to sit there forever. And you're going to be losing some money on vacancy. So just be really careful. Like, we rent property all the time over the holidays, but I would say the hardest time is, between Thanksgiving and Christmas. People just kind of check out. No one wants to be moving during Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Sure.
They'll go look at properties, but they don't want to start a lease then. Like, who wants to do that? That stinks.
Yep.
Even when you have nice weather here. And then they just check out. Well, it's really Thanksgiving through New Year's. And then what we find is when people come back from New Year's, usually a week or two later, they start looking again, and then we start hitting February. Yeah, okay, now it's getting better.
Right.
And then every month until it just keeps building on itself until like July. And we had a crazy July this year. It was really busy. And then it's going to wind down a little bit here, like you said, through October. November, December will really slow down, and then it's going to start picking up again.
Yeah, and maybe use these slower months. If you're a long-term planner like I am, just thinking about, okay, it's November, it's December, or heck, it's January. There's nothing going on in January. Maybe that's a good time to start, some of these projects to get your house rent ready.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to throw in a little tip. So for all of you out there that have multiple investment properties, I learned you may already have figured this out if you're doing all your own showings and leasings and all that. You may, like I said, you might already be thinking this, but this is something a fellow investor told me when I started. Like, I got a year or two into it, and I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. Is be thoughtful about if you've got multiple properties when you time your leases to end, because maybe depending on how things are set up, you probably don't want to be in a scenario where like all your leases are ending in July if you've got 5 or 6 properties, even if they're all right next to each other, for a few reasons. One, they all go vacant at the same time, so that kind of messes up your cash flow, and you got to have a bigger cash buffer. 2, you are going to kill yourself in the month of July, especially if you ever want to take a vacation in July.
Yeah.
And 3, depending on what it is, like I really liked investing in condos that were all in the same complex because it made it very easy for me as a do-it-yourself investor. Well, if you have 3 vacancies all in one specific area at the same time, naturally it's going to take longer probably to fill those, just because there aren't going to be that many people. They're going to be like, oh, there are plenty to choose from. It's like, well, I own all of them. Well, still. So just be thinking about that. And then, likewise, do you really want to set up your lease to end while you're having the holidays with your family or whatever? Do you want to set up the lease to end while you're going to be gone on vacation? Do you want to set up your lease to end on a Friday so that we just kind of started doing this where we don't allow any leases anymore to end on a Friday or a Saturday, because we have built in then for the owner 2 days of vacancy, because we're not going to get out and inspect that property till the following business day. So, if you're $1,500 a month, that's $50 a day. That's $100. Boom, right there. That's maybe a management fee.
Sure.
Which is a whole nother discussion at some future point in time when you're talking about property managers and management fees and who is quote unquote the cheapest,
right? Because
it may not be what you expect when you think about things like that. So, I guess, just be thinking about that. So the timing of when you do that. So I guess if you buy a property and you've got a tenant in there, or, if you've got a couple tenants and you kind of goofed up the timing, when you go do your next renewal, maybe it's not 12 months, maybe it's 8, or maybe it's 16, just to kind of get things lined up and get it spread out so the work's not so crazy. Or maybe you have a few and you can get them all over the summer, but spread them out 1 per month or something like that.
Yeah.
Just a little tip.
Yeah, that's a good tip.
All right. Yeah? No?
Yeah.
Sorry, long awkward pause.
No, we're good. We're good.
All right. So we talked a little bit about determining the date. Now let's talk about when and how you should market. Well, not when. We kind of talked about when, how you should market. So pretty much everything now is online. I do recommend that you do have a sign if you can for the property. Some properties aren't going to allow for that. Because we find that what will happen sometimes is neighbors will drive by in the neighborhood and they're like, hey, I have a niece who's looking for a place and wouldn't she just love to live right next to me? Or my daughter's really looking for a place or whatever. And so we do get that sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
So the sign does still work. The Nicholsworth or whatever, I don't know what they call them here back home, like the Nicholsworth or the whatever ads. Those don't work. Don't put it there. Don't put it on Craigslist, please, for the love of everything holy. I now say that I used to put ads myself a long time ago on Craigslist and it worked well. Not anymore. It's full of scammers and fraudsters. It's just way too early. There's not an easy enough. There's not an easy enough way to vet folks. So we'll talk about that. But we do use we syndicate out to a lot of different platforms. So everything that a property management company does, typically they'll do it for scale. And so really when a property management company charges you, this is kind of an interesting way to think about it. A property management company charges you a little bit more than it costs them to do the work, but they are probably going to be 10 times more efficient at it than you are.
That's right.
So like we have a lot of money and energy and time invested in systems that automate a lot of this stuff for us. So really, when you're looking at doing it yourself, you better not make very much money per year for this to really make sense for you to do on your own. Mm-hmm. Or, like me, you really want to learn how to do it just because you're really interested in it or something else. That's fine. Right. But if you're thinking like, hey, I've got this job that pays me 60 grand, 100 grand, 200 grand a year, and I'm going to rent my own property, you're wasting your time. Because if a property management company only charges you a few percentage points more than it costs them to do it, and they can do it 10 times more efficiently than you, I guarantee you're making more money per hour than it's costing them to do it. So why would you do that? That's
the question I ask people all the time. What is the value of your time?
Yeah.
How much time do you want to dedicate to something like that?
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's just something you kind of got to think through. So, we want to look at things like Zillow. Zillow's now started charging people, but we get half our renters from the Zillow network. So that's like Zillow, Trulia, HotPads as of the time of this recording. They're all the same company. And it is worthwhile to put your listing out there. That's where you're going to get a bulk of traffic. The MLS is dead, folks, for putting rental properties in. There are going to be some realtors out there who hate this, and some property managers maybe who hate this, and maybe even some owners who hate this. But I'll tell you this, I'm going to make up a statistic, but I would guesstimate that roughly 10% of rentals are in the MLS.
Yeah.
And 100% are on Zillow. Mm-hmm. Nah, not 100, but pretty close. And so if I'm a renter,
it is late in the day.
Where am I going to be looking? Not going to be MLS.
Right.
And we've actually run some split tests where we've taken certain properties and we've put them in both places. And every single time we rent them outside of the MLS.
Right.
So don't waste your time. It's not like whoever you're using needs to put it in the MLS. If they put it in the MLS, it's probably not going to really hurt anything, but it's not buying anything by being in there. And you're going to have to pay a commission to the agent that shows it. And in today's day and age, a lot of people don't want to go out with an agent. With the pandemic and everything going on, they don't want to be like, they want to look at stuff on their own or whatever when it's vacant. So just don't waste your time with that. Don't think that that's a big deal. If you're doing it on your own, if you're not in the MLS, don't worry about it. You can do it. You can put it out on all these sites too. There are a lot of other places, you can go. They change I feel like every few months we're changing up where we're syndicating to. You've got like Zumper and several other places. If Facebook works in your area, great. We've had moderate success on that. We typically don't get super solid tenants off Facebook, so we don't bother with it. And it's not easy to do at scale. So anyway, that's kind of some ideas on where you're going to want to syndicate to. So use the sign, definitely go digitally, see if you can find some sort of service that might help it syndicate for you. To make it a little easier so you're not managing tons and tons of different different ads. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some things you might want to include in your marketing for your property and things you want to avoid.
If your house is beneath power lines, I don't know that you want to advertise that.
Yeah.
Still a fine house, but I don't think that needs to be out there.
Your children may make a small buzzing sound when you tuck them in at night.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But you do want to include things like, hey, if you're close to amenities, or sometimes if it's really close to a major intersection of a freeway, we'll say, hey, X minute. This is kind of a cool one that we'll always look at when we're about to market a property is we'll pull up a map and we'll say, well, what's nearby and what's the drive time?
Yep.
So it might be like X minutes to this popular destination.
Right.
Be careful about that. We'll talk about that in just a second. Or, Y minutes to 485 or Z minutes to 77 or whatever. Like
minutes
those
from shopping and restaurants.
Yeah,
and things to that
exactly.
effect.
Yeah. Be uptown in this many minutes, be here in this many minutes. And so that's a really helpful thing. Even though most of the time people are searching on a map, they're just not, you might get, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get someone who's like, I hate my commute time. I am so frustrated that I feel like I live in the middle of nowhere. There's never anything to do around here. Well, everything's closed right now anyway, but there's never anything to do around here. And so that might be enough to kind of capture their attention. Like, oh my goodness, this is close to everything. That's amazing.
And giving someone the ability to, have that mental image of what is around, as Chris mentioned, so much of what's happening, it was online before COVID, even more so now, letting someone actually have that idea of how fast they can get to amenities or to, to the airport or to, Chris mentioned uptown Charlotte. For anyone listening outside of the Charlotte area, we probably need to clarify. Downtown Charlotte is known as uptown. And it confused the heck out of me when I first moved here, but you'll hear us mention uptown, and anyone in and around Charlotte refers to the central business district, central area of Charlotte as uptown.
Thanks for the clarification, because after 3.5 years living here, I still mess it up and get confused.
Yeah, I'm going downtown Charlotte. No, you're going to uptown. So,
yeah. But if you're like, we have this cool area here called like the Whitewater Center. If your property is located 4 minutes away from the Whitewater Center, say that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Say that. That's cool. Okay. So let's talk about things you want to avoid. So that's not all you want to include. Obviously you want to include things like if you've got granite, if it was recently repainted, if it was completely remodeled, those are all things you want to include. If you've got a picture of the garage, you don't necessarily need to say, has a garage. By the way, it has a garage door too. Like, don't worry about that. That's all basic stuff. Now, if most of the townhomes or whatever in that area don't and yours does, okay, highlight it.
That's a selling point. Yeah, absolutely.
If it's fully fenced, highlight that, because that's a big thing for some people. If they have pets or if they have children or whatever, a lot of folks won't rent a place that isn't fenced in. So if you have a fully fenced yard, that's a bonus, and you should just say fully fenced, because the hard part is you want to make sure you have it in the description, because a lot of people no longer trust the photos that are up, because some people will take these great photos and then they let their properties go to crap over 7 years, and the photo's 7 years old and it's like pink paint on the walls because they let a tenant paint pink, and then the other walls are all dingy and dirty, the carpet's torn up, and it's not at all what the pictures look like. So if you say recently remodeled or remodeled in this year, and that's what the pictures show, they're going to go, oh, let's actually take the time to tour this one, because it's probably not going to be like the others, which are all just a can of lies. And you want to be that person. Like you want your property to be that property where applicants say, wow, like I saw your property and it is way nicer than everything else we've seen. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's the difference between getting a tenant or not sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. So things you want to include, things you don't want to include. So we kind of talked about like generic things that everyone has. Don't worry about that. Let's talk about an area where you can get into real hot water. Fair housing and protected classes, right? So there are 7 protected classes. So there are many more ways. I mean, technically, but let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 protected classes. And that's what I thought. That's what I learned. So yeah, okay, good. I'm glad we're still on that. 7 protected classes. There are many more ways to discriminate against people, which might still not be ethical, or it might be ethical. So, for example, one of the things that's not technically a protected class is age. We take the stance that we are not going to discriminate against age. So sometimes people will say, hey, I don't want to rent to college kids. Okay, that's a personal preference. If that is, your thing and you're managing property on your own or whatever, then okay, that's fine. Good for you. We don't take that stance because we don't want to discriminate against age. Because I think for anyone that has been on the other side of that, it doesn't feel very fair.
Right.
So, and it doesn't feel right. So we don't do it. Hey, you can argue with me. You can disagree. That's totally okay. You're okay to disagree. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying we have taken the stance as a company that we're not going to discriminate on age, even though it's technically legal, which might change.
Yeah.
Now, there are some things that does make sense to discriminate on. And that word sounds awful, especially right now. And I don't mean it in an awful way. I mean it in the true sense of the word. But we, like if someone's got a really bad credit score, you can discriminate against that, and other things that you really want to do.
Yeah.
But Jesse, help me out. What are the 7 protected classes that you just don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole?
Very, there are 7. We've established. Race.
Jesse, just so you know, I said 7 pretty confidently. And I don't know if you intended this or not, Jesse, but you gave me the look like, you idiot. It's not 7. And maybe he was just thinking about what he had for lunch, but and then I had to go count, and I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure there are 7.
Oh, that was my fault. I made him count then. No,
Yeah.
no, I didn't mean to. No,
Oh, okay.
I didn't mean
All
to
right.
throw you off. No, you were good. You were good. I think I was just waiting.
Yeah.
Waiting to hear. But
Okay.
no, yes. So there are 7. They are race, color, religion, sex, and national origin, handicap, and familial status. We cannot discriminate against any familial status.
So what does that mean? What's familial status?
How was this described? I'm trying to remember back from my licensing class. A non-traditional family.
Yeah, or a traditional, like either way.
That's
it could
true,
go either
yeah.
way,
It
right?
could,
So
yeah.
like
Good point.
so hey, if it's a single mom, or if it's man and man versus man and wife,
Right.
or if it's someone with kids or someone without kids, like you can't discriminate against different types of families. You can't discriminate based on their family.
Right.
That's a pretty broad term if you kind of think about
Yeah.
it. So, I think that's where, I think rightfully so, some of the, like the LGBT rights that, one could argue certain states have better protections than others. I think there's an argument to be made, potentially. I'm no lawyer. Again, this is one of those things like, why would you discriminate against this anyway? Because, I mean, at the end of the day, people are people and everybody's money is green is what that's what I remember I had a professor in my master's degree who taught real estate law. And he's like, let me just tell you something that my daddy taught me. Everybody's money is green, which is true.
It is.
So who cares? But I think that might be a way potentially that hopefully we can stick it to some of these folks that aren't practicing, aren't doing, they're not being fair. So anyway, okay. So don't discriminate against any of those folks. Not only is it the right thing to do, but it's the law.
Yeah. Stay on the right side of the law by doing the right thing.
Right. And it's not just in North Carolina. Just remember, this is a federal.
That's right.
This is a federal law. So, okay. So we're going to play a little game, right, Jesse?
We are.
Okay. All right. And the name of the game is Legal or Illegal.
So we're going to give you some property descriptions, and we're going to try to see if you can play along with us and determine if this is a legal or illegal description based on fair housing laws.
And it should be noted, these are all descriptions that we've seen out there.
Oh, yes.
In our local market, because Jesse cruises Zillow all the time looking
there.
for folks who are renting out their own property. And this is really common.
Mm-hmm.
And you are really putting yourself in a sticky situation, potentially facing fines and more if you violate one of these things. So, all right, without further ado, our very first game show of Legal or Illegal, play at home.
So, if you see a description or in a description of a property that's for rent around the corner from the YMCA, legal or illegal?
Dun, 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 dun. Illegal.
I thought you were going to do the whole song.
Oh, I don't remember the whole song.
That's
Didn't see
all right.
enough of it. Illegal.
All right.
And why? You want to say why? You want me to say
I'll
why?
let you say why. You
All right.
you looked at me. You gave me the look like,
So this
ready.
is like, there are going to be some of these that sound really goofy, but that's why we picked these, is because we wanted to pick ones that weren't super obvious necessarily. So YMCA stands for the Young Men's Christian Association, right? Academy Association, I think. Alliance.
I thought it was Catholic, but Catholic Christian, regardless.
Okay,
it's
well,
a religious affiliation.
It's a religious affiliation. So you can't discriminate on religion. It's a protected class. And you might go, I'm not discriminating on religion. All I'm saying is there's a YMCA there. It's fact. It's, well, yeah, you're right. However, it's not just about you actually discriminating. It's about the perception you create as well. That's where this gets really tricky. So if I am a tenant and I'm a, I don't know, Jew, Baptist, name some other religion other than Christian, right? And you say, hey, this person, obviously, the YMCA seems to be important to this landlord.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Probably because they want Christians living there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a Christian. I feel discriminated against.
Yep.
And I don't say that in a tone to make it sound like that's not valid, but that's how that's how fair housing is going to look at it in HUD. And they're right. So you don't want to create this perception that potentially you're discriminated against someone on religion. So this would go for this, or I don't know. It'd be kind of like if you said, hey, right around the corner from KKK headquarters. Huh. That's very odd that they mentioned that very unique landmark. Like that one's a little bit more obvious, but this is kind of the same thing. It seems very benign, but you don't want to do that. At the same time, you want to be really careful about anything that could discriminate on one of these other things. So like if there was something to do with sex, I'm trying to think of what would help. But like maybe if you said something like maybe it's just down the street from, say, an all women's gym or an all men's boarding school or something like that, you wouldn't want to say that because you're kind of showing that you might have preference toward that class of people, and that's illegal to do.
Yep. You're showing a bias inadvertently.
Inadvertent bias, but it is one.
Yep.
Or it might be advertent, intentional.
Well, yeah, it could be. It could be. But anyway, yeah, great example.
All right.
All
What's
right.
the next one, Jesse? Hit me.
Next one. You see a description that says no animals of any kind permitted. Legal or illegal? Tough one.
Think hard. No animals of any kind. So, let's see. If I have a pony in your house, I could do that, right? If I want to bring in my pony.
Can you have a pony? What type of pony is it? What's
the
designation of it?
So this is illegal actually to put it this way, because an animal is different. A pet is different than an animal.
Right.
So again, interesting use of the words here. So there are service animals and emotional support animals, and those are not considered pets.
That's right.
You can say no pets allowed, but a service animal or emotional support animal is not a pet. And we could do a whole nother probably podcast on this topic alone. But there are miniature horses out there. And this has kind of made some controversy over the U.S. the last several years. So these miniature horses actually make really great service animals because they live a long time, and it's like really hard to train a service animal, and it's expensive. They live a long time and they can do a lot of things, but a lot of these landlords are like, wait a second, I don't want a freaking miniature horse in my apartment. Like, that's crazy. And then that thing's going to be tromping around, waking up the neighbors. And that's ridiculous. That's an undue hardship. And HUD would say, no, it's not. You got to allow it. Because if you don't allow it, you're discriminating against people that have a handicap. So There are such things as emotional support or service snakes, hamsters, ducks, spiders, you name it, it's out there. It's
I was
not
gonna
just
say.
service dogs anymore.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Squirrels.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't think there's an endless stream of service animals out there. So yeah, it's a small thing, but just changing that word from animal to pet.
Yep. Make sure you don't say anything about animals being allowed or not. Make sure you specifically use the word pet.
Exactly.
And don't say no service animals allowed. Like
Right.
that's even a more egregious offense.
That's a bigger red flag right there.
Just don't do it. So yeah, no animals is illegal.
All right. Next one.
Hit me.
Great bachelor pad.
But it could be a great bachelor pad.
It very well could be. But is that legal or illegal to put that out there?
What do you think? Illegal.
Yes. Congratulations.
It's a very delayed pause. Yeah.
Building suspense.
Yeah, sex, right? I mean, we're discriminating against, hey, it might be a great bachelor pad, and it doesn't mean that you wouldn't rent to women.
That's right.
But you're obviously showing preference.
You're showing a bias.
Yeah. So don't say it's a great bachelor pad.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Walkable to local parks. Legal or illegal?
So this one's interesting. It's technically legal. However, it has been contested in the past. So the fact, now this is where people just are probably going to like roll their eyes or put, do the whole palm to forehead because you could look at the word walkable and say, well, what if you can't walk? What if you've got a wheelchair instead?
Right.
And so I think to some degree, that's where it's been contested in the past. And so far, I don't know of any cases where that's been held up. But yeah, I think it's okay. We try to be careful when we use that term, but I think walkable is one of those words where it kind of provides a connotation of an amount of distance rather than necessarily you have to be able to walk there. But it's one of those tricky things that could change at some point in the future. And we should also mention, because we didn't do our disclosure on this, we are not attorneys.
Good
so
point.
This is not legal advice. This is us just talking about kind of how our policies and what we've learned. So if you're in question or you have a specific question or you're wondering about your specific instance, you should definitely consult a qualified attorney. And yeah, so
Not
there's
us.
our disclaimer.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
All right.
Interesting one. Another one. Playground across the street. Great for families. Legal or illegal?
Illegal.
That's exactly right. Illegal. Because inadvertently, we are discriminating, or you would be discriminating against a familial status that way.
This is probably one of the more, not that specifically that there's a playground across the street, but this is probably one of the more popular ones that people make the mistake on.
Yep.
Because they're like, hey, this property would be great for a family. Or like we get this all the time, and I think people have the best intentions, and if they heard themselves, they would go, ooh, I shouldn't have said that. But we do hear all the time like, yeah, I don't think there really should be a family living here. I think that there should be like a nice husband and wife or like a couple or something without kids, because it's not really meant for kids.
Right.
And it's like, I understand that, but I want you to understand that that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And we're not like, that's for the family or not the family to determine, not for you to determine. And then once you explain it to folks, they usually know. But we'll see people put that in their ads all the time, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Great for kids or great for single couple or not single couple, great for, single nightlife style and blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Yeah. Stay away from that.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, simple thing. You have the best of intentions, but.
Yep. Don't do it.
Nope.
So those are just a few common examples that we see all the time. And so really the rule is when you're talking about the property and writing the property description and even taking the photos, think about it this way. Describe the property itself. Do not describe the potential people or the people.
Right.
So just focus on describing the property. Don't focus on the people or exactly what or who could be using different types of property.
Yeah, that's a great point.
If you do that, hopefully you'll keep yourself out of trouble.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Out of the stress inducing part of the conversation. Hopefully that was helpful though. So now on to photos. So, and photographing the property. So we have the description of the property. Here's how you're going to kind of tee it up and talk about it to folks. And now you got to show it. So as we all know, a picture's worth 1,000 words or 1,000,000. So how are you going to photograph the property? All right. If you suck at photography, have someone else do it. I'll say that.
And be honest with yourself about it. Everyone thinks they're a photographer. Not everybody is.
Most of the photos that are out there by DIY landlords are costing them probably $25 to $100 a month in rent. Most. Not all, but most are. Would you agree, Jesse?
Oh, I think that's more than fair. Absolutely. Because you'll see some photos that are just not doing the property justice.
Yep. So if you go back to our last episode, we talked about when should you invest in something. If something's even going to cost you $25 a month because you have bad photos, and I don't know what a photographer costs, maybe a couple $100 or something, give or take, depending on what you're doing. You pay for them in a year. That's a great return on investment because you keep those photos for quite some time. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, if you can do it on your own, great. I'm going to talk to you about how to do that. And there are ways, the camera in our pocket is awesome.
Oh, absolutely.
And does a pretty good job most of the time. And quite frankly, is sufficient for most of it if done well. If not, then, hire a professional. So, all right, here's what you're going to do. You want to make sure that you're taking as many photos of the property as possible, but you're not going to bore people. So make sure you get one of the front of the house that shows the whole front and the yard and the driveway if it has a garage, etc. Try to take it on a day that has a nice blue sky, not on a grimy day where it's snowing or raining or sleeting. You want people to feel bright and happy and refreshing and, oh, this is going to be easy to move into. And isn't it so wonderful here? And if you can avoid taking the photo where it's the middle of winter and there are no leaves on the trees and everything's brown, try not to do that. Snow on the ground, try not to take a photo of that. If you have to get it rented, fine, do it. And then go back out to the property when it's spring and take more photos and replace them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. All right. So then you're going to get into the front of the house and you're actually going to want to think about the tenant wants to orient themselves to the house. So think about taking photos. Think about taking enough photos that would be sufficient for a tenant to not have to see the property to decide to rent it. That's really what you're trying to do. So you definitely want to get a photo of the living room and the kitchen. So, and we'll talk about order of all this stuff in a while. Several of the kitchen, all the bathrooms, at least one, if not a couple of all the bedrooms.
Yep.
The laundry room, if you've got one, if you've got a secondary living area or something like that, you want to do that too. If it's not real obvious how the garage is configured, or there's something about the garage that's maybe a little bit different or weird, or maybe it's a tandem garage and it's not obvious from the outside, you might want to consider taking a photo of that. We normally don't do garages, but if it's something like that, we would.
Right.
Or if you've got the Washington Redskins painted on your floor, like we were talking about in the last episode, that might be a case or something too. It's sometimes too, you want to take a photo to dissuade people. That sounds counterintuitive, but if you're going to be showing all these people a property, you don't want an overly optimistic view of the property. You want a realistic view of the property. So if you have no intention of painting the pink bedroom and you're going to show people that pink bedroom, now I would say you're not making a very good decision, but make sure you take a photo of it, because what's going to happen is you're going to waste a ton of your time showing a bunch of people that pink bedroom who if they had known about that ahead of time would have never booked a showing and will never rent from you.
Yep.
So make sure that you're taking photos of things the way they are, and you can kind of gloss over some of the imperfections, but if there's something glaringly obvious that's unique about the property, like we talked about before, if you've got the recording studio, don't pretend it's not there.
Right.
Make sure people know it's there. Otherwise, you're just going to waste your time. So make sure you're getting photos of all that. Definitely get a picture of the backyard. And if you've got a back deck or patio area or that kind of thing. Now, how many? A lot. So, I recommend try to aim for, if you can, at least a couple dozen, maybe more. And kind of a cool way to do it, especially if you're like, well, I've only got a 2-bedroom place or whatever. All right, here's a little tip that I learned. Go through the property taking photos, and then go back through in the reverse direction so that you get an angle from the opposite view.
Yeah, different perspective.
A different perspective, because
Sure.
you're going to see different things and see the room in a different way. So that's kind of how I do that. Here are a couple tips. So we use, there's a company out there called Sandmark, SANDMARC. They're not a sponsor yet of ours.
They
either,
will
but
be.
maybe they will be.
We'll get them.
And basically they make these really cool add-on lenses to your phone or phone case. And you can get this pretty cool wide angle lens that doesn't distort the photo at all, but really opens up the room. And instead of only seeing half of the room in a shot as you're standing in the corner, you can see the whole room. So a few things, I'm going to give you guys a few tips. Ready? All right, get your pencils ready if you haven't done this before.
Unless you're driving.
All right, don't always take the photo at the height of your head. Sometimes it's way better and it looks way better to take the photo if you get down on one knee and you take it kind of halfway down the wall. Also, when you're taking the photo, especially with a wide angle lens, try to get as tight into a corner as you can. And if you can't get your body as tight in there, you might even want to see if you can kind of get like, this is going to be hard on the podcast, but like get down and put your arm out to where you can't see the screen and make sure you're holding it kind of steady, and then use the volume button as the shutter button instead, because you can't see the screen, to be able to get the shot. Or sometimes what I'll do is I'll look at the screen and then I can't quite see it, and I'll put the phone right up against the wall so you can't see the screen, and then I'll use the volume button then to take the shot. Be really careful about when you are taking pictures of windows, because depending on how the light's coming through there, it can either be way too dark of a photo or it can completely wash it out.
Yep.
So the way to think about that and kind of adjust for that, at least on the iPhone, is, you know, you touch where you want to focus, and sometimes you can focus right on the window, or other times you want to focus on a corner on the same wall as the window, and you want to increase that brightness by, you can touch on the side of the where you're focusing, and you can run your finger up and increase the brightness of the photo, and you want to play with that. Just check it and make sure it looks good on the screen beforehand. And if you're not sure how it's going to turn out, don't waste your time going back and forth out to the property. Use a few different settings, take a bunch of pictures, and then get them back on your computer and delete the ones that look like garbage.
Yep.
Yeah. Make sure you're getting plenty of, oh, go ahead. Did you have something you want to say?
No, I think I was just grabbing some oxygen. I'm riveted by this.
Sorry, I'm like, my throat is almost sore. I feel like I've been talking too darn much. So anyway, I hope that's helpful with the photo thing. There's certainly some other things, like make sure, like if you wear your shoes in the house, take your shoes out of the picture. Okay, here's another one. I get asked all the time: photograph the property vacant or with furniture in it. Jesse, thoughts?
Vacant.
Okay. What if my furniture is really nice?
It's really nice for you, and it's your furniture, but it's not staying in the house, is it? Most likely it's not.
Most likely it's not. Now, I will say, if it looks really nice, there are properties, it's rare, but there are some times where people just have, like, it's done well.
Sure.
And you're like, yeah, we should try to get a picture with this furniture in here because it's really nice.
You have to be as objective as possible. Think to yourself, does this look like a Better Home and Garden kind of layout, or something that I would see in a magazine? And if, to Chris, to your point, if it's looking really great, if it's a professional type of interior decoration, maybe you can. But more often than not, you're going to be better off showing the house vacant so that someone can come in. It's like a clean palette for them, basically.
When in doubt, go vacant. That's what we tell folks.
Absolutely.
Now, we also tell them, like, either have it nicely furnished or have it vacant. Don't do in between.
Yeah, you don't want it 50-50.
Don't do like,
No way.
hey, so I left my couch there and there are boxes in the corner because I'm in the middle of moving out. Okay, then you should just wait till it's vacant.
Yep.
Or strategically photograph around the boxes or whatever.
Yep.
But don't, some people get all worked up about this who've never done it before, and I did too at the beginning. They're like, I just don't know what to do. I think if I photograph it vacant, like, people will be able to picture themselves in here. Well, we get it both ways from tenants. Some people go, wow, I really like that there's furniture in here because then I can see how things will fit. And other
Right.
people, half of them, the other half go, man, I love the fact that it's empty so I can visualize all my own stuff in here, not someone else's. So I think the important thing is you just want it to look, again, marketing for the masses, right?
Yep.
So make it as appealable to as many people as possible.
Right. Absolutely.
And then again, there are some things to do where if you do have a lens flare, or you've got, maybe you have a stain in the carpet that you realize once you get the photo home and you've got to go take care of it. Okay. And I'll give you another little trick, freebie. In recent versions of Windows, and if you have Photoshop or you photo junkies out there, there are way more advanced tools than this. But even in like the free version of Windows, when you go to edit the picture, there's a little tool in there called Spot Fix. And that thing is magical. And you can get rid of some of those little imperfections in the photos right away. Again, you don't want to lie to people, right? But if you've got like a little dirt spot and you're like, oh, geez, I wore my shoes on the carpet and I shouldn't have. I got to go get that clean. Use the Spot Fix tool. Get that taken care of. Don't show that in there. Yes, it will make a difference. Yes, it will get you a worse quality tenant. Don't do it. Show the photo shape.
Yeah, look at the picture and ask yourself, is this a clean photo? It isn't, and when I say clean, it's not just, dirt. It's not just looking at something that is unappealing. Is it clean of obstructions? Does it, like Chris mentioned before, does it have your personal items? Are your shoes in the photo? Why? If they are, move them off to the side.
Take out the hand towel that grandma knitted you with the rooster on it in the kitchen.
Right.
Like, I think when we talk about common mistakes that people make, it's like the photos are too dark, there aren't enough of them, and they have too many personal effects in them. Those are the most common mistakes that we see.
Exactly.
But if you follow this, you're going to take some awesome photos. Now, the other question is, what I think you should be doing too, ideally, is getting a video of the property. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect, but think about it this way, especially with Charlotte. There's so many people moving here from out of town. If you can take a video of the property, you're potentially going to, and no one else has a video, guess what? You just gave them a much more comprehensive view of the home. They might rent it sight unseen. And they're not going to rent your neighbor's sight unseen because he didn't have a video.
And think about this. We're seeing this more and more, again, in the age of COVID. Individuals are limited from actually being able to go out to properties. Having that video walkthrough that Chris is mentioning is so important, and it gives you such a leg up over the competition.
Now, there are probably some free video editing tools out there. I'm not really sure what it is. We use one that's pretty cost effective. It's called Filmora. It's a middle of the road video editing software, easy to use. Make sure you mute the video, or if you are going to talk into the camera, just make sure you're professional about it and you can hear you and not a bunch of background noise. And also, as you're going through the house, when you're doing the video, just make sure you're not being careful about, like, walk through the house with the phone first, especially if it's your first time. Make sure all the lights are on, make sure all the blinds and stuff are set how you want to, and then walk through the home in one nice clean motion without stopping. And just be careful when you come up on mirrors. When you come up on mirrors, you don't want a nice junky picture of yourself. Like, that's not, people aren't renting you. They're renting the home and they don't want to see you. So when you come into a bathroom or something like that, keep the angle of that lens down a little bit more so that the top view of the frame is like just above the backsplash on the counter, and then kind of pan in and up toward like the shower and the toilet, and then kind of pan back down and out as you're coming out of the bathroom. That'll help you keep away from those mirrors. Same thing when you're coming up on the storm door or the glass front door. That's a great opportunity as you're coming up on that front door. Pan back out toward the street while you use your other hand to open the door and take a look at what the neighborhood looks like. Now the door's open, you pan back in and come on inside. Same thing as you're going out the back door if it's made of glass. So
think to yourself, what will a potential tenant want to see? And that's a great point.
And they don't want to see you and, just getting home from work in your flip-flops or whatever you're doing. So.
Right, exactly.
All right. And then the other thing that we do for clients, which is pretty cool, I think, especially now with what's going on, is these 360 photos. So you can do, you can take photos that basically look like Google Street View, but inside your house. And that's a really cool way. That's a much better perspective for people to really get a feeling for what the property looks like.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of those things where, someone like a property manager, they've already made the investment in the equipment. They can do it for you at scale a little cheaper than you can do it on your own. But some of this stuff is coming down in price too, that you can do on your own. It's just a matter of having the tools to be able to effectively show it right now. So Zillow's starting to do this where they're allowing 360 home tours and that kind of thing. So, you can get like a Ricoh camera or something like that has a 360 view on it. But that's something I'd strongly encourage. Again, if you can get those people from out of state who need to find a place, now, when we talk about marketing to the masses, you've now just marketed to a whole group of people that your competition isn't marketing to, who are the people that are willing to go ahead and secure a property sight unseen.
Yeah, and I think as we keep mentioning COVID and what's going on right now, I think that's only going to increase. Even as we come out of this pandemic, people are looking for opportunities to see and tour homes virtually, especially if you're coming in from out of state, which happens quite frequently.
And let's be honest, anyone who's ever relocated, especially temporarily for a job, you don't really necessarily want to make the trip all the way down somewhere just to go cram in looking at a whole bunch of properties in a weekend and then come back. That's just it. I don't know. Maybe some people like doing that, but I always thought that sucked whenever I had to do it. Yeah, so I'd much rather be on my living room in the comfort of my own house, be like, oh, I've seen everything I need to see.
Pretty much, yeah. You can make a decision from the comfort of your living room.
Yep, exactly. All right. So once you got the photos, you got the description, you got where it's going, when it's going up, now we're going to talk about how many people should you actually be getting in front of. So I alluded to in episode 1, one of my biggest mistakes as an investor was getting too lazy and not knowing how many people I really need to get in front of. Now, I'll say this. As a company, our rental criteria is a little bit more strict than most, but not unreasonable. We just try really hard. We're guaranteeing the tenants we're placing in properties, so we want to make sure we're pretty confident they're going to work out. And again, owners' biggest fears typically are like, hey, destroying the property and paying rent on time, right? So we want to make sure that we set those folks up for success. Now, what I'm going to share with you is on these numbers are our actual numbers that we see. We went back. So we talk about being geeky real estate guys, right? Like this is how geeky we are. So I went back and I actually did a statistical analysis where I looked at different groupings of price points of properties that we've managed over time. And then I look for what the true mean of that sample set was as far as number of times we've had to show, and then what the true standard deviation was for all those. And from there, we can kind of come up with a confidence interval on how many showings, applications, et cetera, it's going to take before we rent out your property based on historical data.
And if you're still listening after hearing standard deviation and confidence interval, more power to you.
Yeah, that's the sound of everyone else sleeping.
But it is good data.
All right, so here's like a representative on a property that's $1,200 to $1,500, which is like a typical investment property. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's on the median to low side, but that's a very popular price point. So what we're looking at is I'm going to quote you numbers that are the 50th percentile and the 90th percentile. So what that means is the 50th would be like the average. Half of our properties rent and less than that, half of them more, but like that's like the average. And then the 90th would be in order to get, if once we hit this number, 90% of our properties would have had a signed lease by that number. Make sense?
Does to me.
All right, great. So I want you guys at home, I'm going to pause for a little bit because I want you to guess how many it's going to take. Because again, like I said, this was a number one thing that I messed up on. So number of inquiries. So that would be like someone clicking on your ad on Zillow saying, give me more information, or sending you an email or a text or whatever. Number of inquiries. Jesse, how many inquiries on average does it take to rent a $1,500 a month property?
109.
109. Now the 90th percentile. So that's only half. Right? That's the average. So 9 out of 10 properties will have rented by the time we hit 260 inquiries.
Imagine that.
For one round of renting the property. That's crazy. Like that's a lot of volume. Now everyone's numbers are going to be a little bit different. Like I said, we're a little bit more on the strict side. We're talking plus or minus a couple hundred inquiries.
Right. Still giving you an idea that there needs to be a lot of traffic.
You think you have a lot of email now. All right. Now, number of leads. So a lead would be someone that like actually maybe filled out more information on it, or they actually corresponded with you in some way, or they said they wanted to go see the property or something like that. So not just someone that like clicked the button on Zillow saying, give me more information, send me to the page, but like an actual someone who expressed more interest. And that number is going to be
31
to 68. So we tell owners expect that it's going to take us 31 to 68 leads in order for us to get a signed lease on your property for a $1,500 a month property.
Amazing.
Yeah. Number of showings. Now this is the part. Any of you who've ever shown a property before, I bet you're not doing this many showings. Most people are like showing 1 to 5 people, and they're like, hey, guess what? First person I showed the property to, totally interested, got myself a tenant. How awesome am I?
And they sound just like that too.
Jesse talks to a lot of those people.
Yes, he does.
But what's the truth, Jesse? What does it take us?
We are averaging between 13 and 30.
Yeah, 13 and 30 showings. Now, we have had some properties where, and this is why not every property is a good fit for us. I've had some properties where it's just the right property in the right location for the right price point, where we will get double or triple that number. And that's crazy. Like, and luckily we have a system to do that to where that's not a huge deal for us. Mm-hmm. But it's nuts. And, you know, if you think about it, I mean, that's just so, I don't know, it's just so time consuming, and no one's, I guess what's interesting about that number is that what other owners probably aren't doing, if you're doing this on your own, that we do, is we actually tell people before they see the property, hey, by the way, here's our rental criteria. And then they have to fill out a questionnaire that asks them, like, is your credit score above this amount? Do you have any felonies? Does this, that, or the other thing? Mm-hmm. And then it recommends, and it says, if you answered no to any of these, or yes, or whatever, this may not be a good property for you. Are you sure still you want to go see it? And so that number is after we've pre-screened people. So if you're doing this on your own without pre-screening, like, you should increase these numbers a little bit if you want to get the tenants as quality as what we typically find.
That's right.
So, you know, it's really easy. This is the mistake I made, is I would go with the first person who's like wants to submit an application that didn't look horrible on paper. You know, how many applications, Jesse, typically is it going to take?
To lease out between 4 and 9.
4 and 9 applications. Now, that's not to say you can't get lucky
right.
and get a solid one on the first one, and especially the higher price point properties. We typically see that, but I'll even see on high price point properties that sometimes we'll get applicants in that make a lot of money, but their credit's awful. They don't like to pay their bills.
Right.
That happens. You know, I had a guy call me, and his first comment back when he got denied was, he's like, I make an S load of money. Why did you deny me? And I'm like, well, 1, you're rude, sir. And 2, you might make a lot of money, but you didn't prove it to us.
Yeah.
And 3, your credit is in the toilet. So, yeah, of course I didn't say it quite like that. I was a little more diplomatic. A little more diplomatic and constructive. But, you know, there are those folks out there. So just because they show up in a Ferrari doesn't mean they should rent your place.
Yeah.
In fact, it might be a good reason not to.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of my worst tenants one time had a Jaguar.
There you go.
Yep.
Yeah, I believe that too, actually.
Yep. Okay, so let's see. You know, I guess what we're trying to say is, like, hey, you got to be more patient than you want to be in this process.
Absolutely.
And if that's not you, don't do it. Have someone else help you. And, you know, if you think about it like this, if you had a briefcase full of cash, $200,000 in there in cash, maybe $500,000 in cash, would you just give it over to the first person you met? No, you would be very patient.
Right.
So why would you do that with a $200,000 or $500,000 house? You shouldn't, but people do.
Right.
You need to treat it like that. Your house is a big pile of cash, and your job in managing it is to preserve and grow the pile of cash.
Yeah. Make sure you're finding the right tenant.
Yes.
Even if it takes a little bit longer than you might otherwise want. It's easy to get excited. Oh man, we've got an application right out of the gate. This is fantastic. But for all the reasons Chris is mentioning, there could be red flags that you do not want to ignore. Just because someone's first doesn't mean they're the best.
Exactly. And one of our episodes here in just a few is just going to be exactly that. How do we screen and qualify tenants? Because there's a lot in there, so we're not going to go into all that right now. But there are a lot of red flags that, quite frankly, like we've done over 1,000. We've screened over 1,000 applicants in the last few years, 3 years, and there's just a lot that you learn by doing that. That you won't learn even if you've got 10 of your own properties and you're doing it on your own. Just not going to happen because you just don't see as many things. So, yeah, there's a lot of things to look out for. There's some cool practical things. We'll give some tips there too. But just know you've got, these numbers might be more than what you're looking to do. And maybe if, you want sub or average or sub-average tenants as far as payment terms and how they treat the property, certainly you don't need this many. But if you want that really good quality tenant, then these are real world. This is what we actually go by. Like I said, this was like an actual analysis that we did looking historically. So just think about that as you're trying to be patient on your next round of seeking out a tenant. All right, let's keep going so we don't lose folks. Let's see. I guess the thing that I would think about too here is, like, if you have a full-time job, is your boss going to be thrilled about you saying, hey, Mr. Boss Man, just ignore it as I answer the phone 200 times for these prospective tenants of mine that are coming in for this property I'm trying to rent out. And by the way, can I leave, 10 or 30 times during lunch or early to be able to go show people my property?
Right.
So is that something that realistically you're going to be able to do? And are you going to have the resources and the patience and the eye and the tolerance for looking through, 4, 10 applications and really understand how to not discriminate on that and make sure that you're picking the best one and that you're fair and transparent with those people on what your process is?
Yeah, this comes back to, as we've mentioned time and time again, your vision. And then more importantly, your planning. If you're going to be doing this, as Chris is mentioning here, you need to plan accordingly and understand what it's going to take and the dedication you need to have to actually rent out this property.
Exactly. All right, Jesse. So how long does all this take? How long are we on the market for?
Well, and this is the answer everybody hates, but it depends.
Yep.
There's a lot of different factors that are actually going to go into the amount of time it's going to take to rent out your property. So you've done everything we've described. You've taken great photos. You've planned. You've strategized. You know when you're moving. You know when you want the house to actually be rented out. But then how long is it all going to take? Well, one thing right out of the gate, market demand. What type of movement is happening in the market where you are? And that is going to be conditional on, of course, your location in the country. And it's also going to depend on, of course, the time of year that you're in. As we described earlier, this time of year is incredibly hot for rental properties and just for real estate in general. There's a lot of movement going on over the summer. But how does that change? If you're putting a house on the market in July, hey, great. If you're doing it in January, you're probably going to need to reasonably expect it might take a little bit longer. Of course, we described earlier in terms of preparing the property, the condition of the property. That is going to be such an important factor. What have you done to actually improve or, at a minimum, maintain a very well cared for home to have it ready for rent? And the most important thing, and the thing that is always a sticking point, price.
Price will fix everything else.
Yeah,
to get your property rented.
Absolutely. So Chris talked a little bit before about, making sure if it's overpriced, we're not taking someone who is right out of the gate willing to pay necessarily too much. We also don't want to underprice. We don't want to leave money on the table for you, but we want to make sure there are reasonable expectations that you would set for your home. If your house is similar to one right down the street and it's renting for $1,800, that's a pretty good baseline for you. That's, don't go thinking just because you have, I don't know, a slightly larger deck in your backyard than that house does, like that doesn't automatically net you an extra $300 a month. So set expectations or have reasonable expectations for what you can get for your house. There are a lot of tools out there for determining the appropriate price, and that's Pretty much that's what we do as property managers, getting in there and like diving into the nitty-gritty. As Chris demonstrated with those numbers before, we are the nerds who look at this kind of stuff and trying to make the determination, what will a house rent for?
Absolutely. And, so what we normally tell folks is like, hey, we feel like if a property's on the market, give or take a little under 3 weeks, depending on a lot of factors, like what your timeline is, if you're moving out of the property, if you live there, or if you're advertising the property prior to closing on it or something like that, if you're buying it as an investment, we're looking for ideally within a couple, 3 weeks to having a signed lease. If we have one a lot faster than that, it might be an indication that potentially price was a little bit lower, than it should be, maybe. If it goes longer than that, then it's an indication that it is. But again, if you kind of go back and you look at, hey, if I've got to have 260 showings or something like that, or 260 inquiries, that's like if you get 10 per day, that's 26 days. That's the better part of 4 weeks.
Yep.
So, you're really looking for multiple inquiries a day, 10, 20 inquiries a day, something like that, in order to make sure that you're kind of on track.
And if you're not getting that, consider where you are in the market, considering how you're marketing, considering the photos you have, consider your price. So
yeah, absolutely.
You always want to consider, reevaluate your position.
It's back to a gut check on whether or not you're being really realistic about your competition.
Absolutely.
All right. So, a lot of folks tell us, hey, I don't want to show with strangers in my house. If you are looking to rent your property and you currently live there, that's okay. You don't have to. Just know you're probably going to take a hit on some vacancy. And if that's okay with you, then that's okay. But, you are going to have to show your home just like if you were selling it. And like we said, you got to be thoughtful about that. Now, we are starting to we're kind of taking a little bit of a different approach here and testing some things out that are actually working pretty well, because we do take such good photos and do the video, and sometimes depending on the client, we'll do the 360 photos. We're actually seeing some folks who are willing to rent sight unseen right now. And I hope that's a trend that continues, because trying to rent out a property when someone is in there is really tough. Now, I would always recommend that you do market a property. If you have a tenant that's currently in there, you don't want to automatically bake in the vacancy that happens by waiting to market the property until that tenant leaves. You want to start marketing that property before that current tenant leaves. Now, I usually say if you're going out more than 6 weeks in advance of when that tenant leaves, it's a waste, because you might get someone, but chances are pretty good you won't. Especially if you're paying for any marketing, like on Zillow and that kind of thing. So I usually think, hey, if you're give or take around the 4 week mark, plus or minus a week, that's pretty good. And realize that people are usually looking, the better tenants are looking give or take a month out. And then you got to be thinking about too, how long is it going to take me to turn this property over? That's where routine evaluations and walkthroughs of your property come in handy, so you don't get surprised. So you already have a list, and hopefully things coordinate and things like that, which we'll talk about in a later episode. But start marketing the property while it's occupied, ideally, if you want to minimize your vacancy and increase your cash. That's huge. That could be real big dollars, several $100s or sometimes thousands of dollars if you don't plan for that well. And then, just make sure that you're not going to show it unless it's in ship shape. So even if you start to advertise it, you could kind of market, hey, coming soon, we're going to start showings on this date, but this is what this property looks like. And we're just going to put all, like we put in our ads, we're putting the finishing touches on for you, which is true. And the finishing touches might mean, hey, something went on and we got to paint this whole wall or whatever. And then what you want to do is you just don't show the property. Again, back to like attracts like Jesse keeps saying too, like attracts like. So if someone was in there and they were dirtier than you were hoping, or they didn't take as good a care of as you wanted, don't show that property. Wait.
Right.
Because what you're going to end up with is you're going to end up with another tenant just like that.
Yeah.
Because the good tenants are going to say, ew, gross, no way. And they'll smile at you and say, oh, yeah, I really like it. We'll talk about it and get back to you. Mm-hmm. And the really bad tenants are going to be like, oh, yeah, this is great. I can put in an application. And it's like, nope, don't. If you really like it in this state, then you're not the person I want in here making a mess. So just don't wait to show it until it's clean and ready to go. A lot of people we've got a client right now is like, oh, yeah, just show it while it's in construction and tell them, hey, it'll be no big deal. And it's like, well, okay, we could show it while it's in construction. That in and of itself isn't a bad deal. And he's like, I've always shown it in the past. when it's been in really rough shape, and told them I'll fix it and take care of it. And I'm like, well, that's why it continues to be in rough shape, because you keep getting the same type of tenant in there
Right.
who keeps destroying it.
It becomes a vicious cycle.
And it's like, you will really want to spend 10 grand every 2 years to turn over your property. I don't.
Right.
So, we got to have those conversations sometimes with folks too.
Yeah, but that is a great point that you bring up, Chris, in terms of saying, hey, we're putting the finishing touches. You can do that, and that's a wonderful way to market a property, and it does also entice someone to say, oh, hey, they're doing something. Maybe they're remodeling. Maybe they're adding or editing something that...
Yeah.
Oh, not editing.
They care.
Yeah, they do. Exactly. It demonstrates that you're taking pride in the property.
Yep. If you are going to do showings on your own, one, just make sure you're safe. Sometimes people will target folks out there showing their own property. There's a lot of fraudsters out there, scammers, but then there are flat out just people looking to hurt people and do bad things. So just be really safe about it, especially if it's in an area where you're just kind of worried about, or if it's going to be at night, or if you're more vulnerable, go with a friend, whatever.
Let someone know that you're there.
Let someone know you're there.
Things
Keep your
like
phone
that.
out with you. Do things like, if you're going on your own, even we do this, like we will open the door for someone. And if it's more of a vacant property and we, for some reason, happen to be with them, then, we'll like let them in, and then you stay right by the door and don't lock the door and just let them go do their thing. They don't want you following them around anyway.
Yeah.
That's weird and creepy. And feels like high pressure. And then, if there are things, make sure that you're always the closest one to the door when you're following them around. Again, hopefully nothing ever happens. We've never had anything happen, but you just never know. When you start to get some of these applications back and you realize some of the people looking at your property have committed murder, and I'm talking about like decent properties, like we've had that applicants, and it's like, oh, you have murder as a felony? Like, no thanks. I'm not excited to go show you a property. And that's why we don't do that. And we'll talk, we could talk about that more later, but, so just be really thoughtful about that. Like, you're going to get those people, and they might be totally, socially adjusted, like totally safe people to be around, or they might not, but I don't want to be the guy to find out.
Right.
And then, there are pros and cons to kind of showing in batches. So, people are going to flake out even if you confirm the appointment ahead of time, which you should do, like confirm with text and a phone call. Probably half of people are going to no-show. So, you want to batch showings to some degree or cluster them around each other so you save your time going out to your property. But I think the downside, some people are like, hey, I really love batching because it gets competition, and like I'll get multiple people in there at the same time. I'm like, oh man, I got to get this property. I kind of get a different feeling after doing enough of these. I kind of feel like that's almost counterproductive, because people go, there are a lot of people here. Someone's probably already got it already. Mm-hmm. And then they kind of move on to the next one. So I wouldn't recommend that. And some people are just put off by it, quite frankly, too. They'll just be like, oh, it was so unprofessional. We thought we had this house to ourselves to look at for 15 minutes, and there were 2 other people there. How rude.
Right.
And
then they move on.
And then they move on. So, try it out, see what works for you. I like to do it where like I will put people back to back, and then I'm like, hey, if you come in and you're doubled up with someone, that's your own fault for showing up a little bit late. And then that kind of begs the question, like, should you rent to someone who showed up late? And I think the answer is no.
That's a red flag right there.
Because guess what? If they show up late, they don't respect you or your time. Mm-hmm. And if they show up late, they're going to pay late or not pay or not follow the rules.
Right.
So why would you rent to that person? Mm-hmm. Now, if they call you ahead of time, they're very professional about it, they have a real good excuse.
That's different.
Then that's different. Also, don't bother calling people who no-show.
Yeah.
Don't. Because you're not going to rent to them.
Yeah.
They failed your first qualification criteria, which is, can you keep an appointment? No. Next.
Right.
This goes back to people who get desperate. This was another mistake I made when I first started. My wife's like, well, you should call them. They were supposed to be here. And I'm like, well, yeah, the German in me wants to be like, you shall keep your appointment, but ultimately it's like, I don't want that person renting from me.
Right.
I don't want them in there. So no, I'm not going to call them.
Yeah.
In fact, if they try to reschedule with me, I'm going to tell them, no, it's taken.
Yep.
Because we're not doing this again. So
yeah, it's human nature to think, well, they've expressed interest in the property before, so maybe they're interested. But no, to Chris's point, don't chase. You don't need to. That's not the kind of tenant you want.
Now, when you're showing the property, be thinking about if there are ways that you can do it kind of more contactless. Certainly in the days of COVID right now, this is kind of a couple tips. So, make sure you show up in a mask if you're going to be letting people in. You just don't know. One, it's the law here in North Carolina right now.
Probably
Two, you just want to be careful not to offend someone, and you never know who's going to be there looking for housing if they're high risk and whatnot. You just don't know that. So
That's right.
make sure you're doing that, unfortunately not shaking hands, that kind of thing. Also, if there's a way for you to do some sort of contactless showing safely, we've got that nailed down to a science now. And then on occupied property, we're actually taking applications prior to showing. We're allowing for applications, but we're not doing showings while the property is currently occupied. And that actually is working better than we expected. Even like Jesse said, we're renting a lot of stuff sight unseen. So, but that's what will happen if you pay attention and take those good photos and videos and that kind of thing. You can do that too. And then make sure you're cleaning the property on a regular basis. So go through, disinfect doorknobs, handles, light switches, counters, that kind of thing. You want to be doing that at least probably on a weekly basis. Make sure you're keeping the lawn mowed and that kind of thing too. Everything's staying presentable.
Yeah, curb appeal. I mean, keep it strong, keep it high. You've done a great job getting your property ready. Maintain and continue throughout the process.
Absolutely.
So that was a lot.
That was really a lot. We're at like an hour and a half.
That is definitely a lot. So
sorry, I was thinking, I started this and I'm like, man, marketing, this is going to be like a half-hour episode.
Yeah. But we kind of, we got into the meat and potatoes of what marketing really is. And really there's a lot to this. And again, a broken record, but that's the whole point of this, is to continue building on what we've already spoken about. Strategic planning, having a vision. What this really means to you is, okay, we've made the determination, we're either renting out our home, we're purchasing an investment property. What does that look like? This piece, specifically marketing, is integral. It is so important. You want to make sure you're doing it properly. From those small tips that we kind of shared earlier on, to taking the appropriate photos, as Chris was just mentioning, pricing it appropriately, thinking about strategically when you are actually placing the house on the market, and then when you have showings, making sure you are being strategic with your time. And Chris, you mentioned having tenants not show up. Make sure you're showing up.
Yes.
I mean, that's also a bad indication to a potential tenant if you're late for a showing. So,
exactly.
We want to be as professional as possible in all instances. So, the most important thing is, if you do a lot of the things we mentioned, if you are looking to be professional with your photos, if you stay on the right side of the law with your write-up, with the fair housing items we had discussed before, if you're doing everything the right way, you will rent the home without question. But yeah, that was a lot.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. That was a good wrap up, Jesse. I appreciate that. Well, hey, without further ado, we are the Investment Property Geeks of Charlotte. And don't forget to subscribe, and please leave us a review so other folks can hear this podcast too. Thank you so much for your time, sticking in there and listening. We hope you found this super duper valuable. And this is Chris and Jesse wishing you a brighter life through real estate.